Do not be anxious about anything. That command didn't free me. It trapped me. Because every time anxiety hit, I didn't just have the original problem to deal with. I had the crushing weight of believing my anxiety itself was sin, that I was failing God by feeling afraid. But then I stopped reading about anxiety and started investigating Jesus in Gethsemane. I spent a lot of time in Luke 22, digging into the Greek medical terminology Luke uses as a physician, tracking down every Old Testament allusion Jesus quotes, and cross-referencing the parallel accounts in Matthew and Mark to see what they emphasize. And here's what I found. If your anxiety is sin, then Jesus sinned. And if Jesus didn't sin, and he didn't, then we need to completely rethink what we mean when we call anxiety sinful. It all starts with one Greek word in Luke 22:44 that changed everything about how we understand our panic attacks. Luke 22:44, look at this. Being in agony. The Greek word is agonia, where we get our English word agony. It's the same root as agon, which means a contest, a struggle, an intense fight. Jesus isn't peacefully accepting what's coming. He's in a fight. He's experiencing extreme anxiety. And Luke, remember, Luke is a physician. Luke uses medical precision here. His sweat became like great drops of blood. This is called hematidrosis. It's a rare medical condition where someone is under such extreme psychological stress that their capillaries burst and blood mixes with sweat. This isn't metaphorical language. This isn't poetic exaggeration. Luke is the physician giving us clinical observation. Jesus was so anxious, so distressed that his body manifested physical symptoms of extreme stress. And this is where I got stuck. Because everything I'd been taught said anxiety equals lack of trust. That if you really believed God was in control, you wouldn't fear. And that peace should be the constant state of a faithful Christian. But here's Jesus, the only perfectly faithful human who ever lived, sweating blood from anxiety. So either Jesus sinned, or our definition of sinful anxiety is wrong. Let's come back to that, because what Jesus does next is the key to understanding the difference between human weakness and sinful unbelief. But first, you need to see what he's actually anxious about. Verse 42, Jesus' prayer. Remove this cup from me. What is the cup? Jesus isn't talking about a literal drinking vessel. He's using Old Testament language that every Jew would have understood. Throughout the prophets, the cup is God's wrath poured out on sin. It's judgment, it's punishment, it's the full weight of divine justice against human rebellion. And Jesus knows with perfect clarity that in a few hours, he's going to drink that cup. He's going to experience the wrath of God that we deserve. He's going to be forsaken by the Father. Psalm 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's not just physical suffering, that's spiritual agony. The Son who has existed in perfect union with the Father for all eternity is about to experience separation. And Jesus is terrified. But here's where it gets crucial, because Jesus doesn't just feel anxiety. He does something specific with it. And this is the distinction we've been missing. Look at the structure of Jesus' prayer in verse 42 again. Part 1, complete honesty. Jesus doesn't hide his feelings. He doesn't spiritualize them. He doesn't say, I'm at peace with this, when he's not. He says, I don't want this. If there's any other way, I'm asking for it. This is raw humanity. This is the man Jesus, fully human, experiencing the full weight of what it means to be human in a fallen world, feeling the natural human desire for self-preservation. And it's not sin. And this is what gave me hope, because I'd been taught that even feeling the desire to escape suffering meant I lacked faith. That asking God, is there another way, was evidence of unbelief. But Jesus asked that exact question and remained sinless. Notice part 2 of the prayer, because this is where we see the line between human weakness and sinful unbelief. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. This is the hinge. This is where Jesus shows us what it means to be anxious without sinning. The word nevertheless in Greek is plein. It means, but in spite of all of that, despite everything I just said, regardless of what I want, Jesus isn't denying his human desire to avoid the cross. He's not pretending he doesn't feel the anxiety. He's subordinating his human will to the Father's will. And here's the critical distinction. Sinful anxiety says, I know what's best, and I demand God do it my way. Sinful unbelief says, God's plan can't be trusted. But Jesus says, I feel everything that humanity feels. I want what any human would want, but I trust that your will is good even when it doesn't feel good, and I submit. This changed everything for me. Anxiety becomes sin not when we feel it, but when we refuse to submit it to God. When we insist on our own way, when we treat our fear as more authoritative than God's promises, anxiety becomes sin not when we feel it, but when we refuse to submit it to God. When we insist on our own way, when we treat our fear as more authoritative than God's promises. And Luke gives us one more detail that seals this interpretation, a detail that Matthew and Mark don't include. And when I saw it, everything clicked. Verse 43, right in the middle of Jesus' agony, an angel from heaven strengthening him. Only Luke records this, and it matters because of what happens next in verse 44. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly. Wait, an angel comes to strengthen Jesus, and after that, he's still in agony? The angel didn't make the anxiety go away? No, the angel gave him strength to continue submitting even in the agony. And here's what's beautiful about this. The Father doesn't remove the suffering. He doesn't take away the anxiety, but he provides strength to endure it faithfully. This is the pattern for us. When we bring our anxiety to God, when we're honest about our fear and our desire to escape, we're not promised that anxiety will disappear. We're promised strength to submit to God's will even when feeling the anxiety. And I know this might feel unsatisfying because we want the anxiety to go away. We want peace that means the absence of turmoil. I felt the same frustration when I first saw this. I wanted Jesus to show me how to make anxiety just disappear, how not to remain faithful while experiencing it. But that's exactly what makes us so freeing. Here's the framework I finally landed on after wrestling with this for weeks. Human weakness, which is not necessarily sin. Feeling anxiety about real threats. Wanting to avoid suffering. Asking God for relief. Experiencing physical symptoms of stress. Now, sinful unbelief that is absolutely sin. Demanding God do things our way. Refusing to trust God's goodness. Taking control instead of submitting. Treating our feelings as ultimate truth. Jesus felt anxiety. Jesus wanted relief. Jesus asked for another way. Jesus experienced extreme physical stress. None of that was sin. What would have been sin? If Jesus had said, I don't care what you want, Father. I'm not doing this. If he'd run from the garden. If he'd refused to submit to the Father's will. And this convicted me deeply, because I'd been treating my anxiety attacks as evidence of spiritual failure. I'd been repenting for feeling afraid. I'd been ashamed of asking God to change my circumstances. But Jesus shows us, bring the fear. Voice the desire for relief. Feel the full weight of your humanity. And don't stop at that feeling. Move to submission. Father, I'm terrified. I don't want this. If there's another way, I'm begging you for it. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. So, we've seen Jesus' agony in the garden. Medical-grade anxiety so severe he sweat blood. We've seen his honest prayer, asking for relief without hiding his humanity. We've seen the angel strengthening him, not to remove the suffering, but to enable submission within it. If you want to walk through this material more slowly, I've put together a written case file on anxiety that lays out the passages, evidence, and questions in one place. You can find it linked in the description. But here's the piece that ties everything together. The difference between Jesus and us isn't that he didn't feel anxiety. The difference is what he did with it. Jesus felt the full force of temptation to avoid suffering. He felt genuine anxiety. He experienced real human weakness. But he didn't sin. Which means anxiety itself, the feeling, the physical symptoms, the desire for relief, is not sin. It's weakness. It's humanity. It's what it means to live in a broken world in a broken body. Sin enters when we refuse to submit that weakness to God, when we insist on autonomy instead of trust. And this is the stunning beauty of the gospel. Jesus went into the garden and felt the full weight of anxiety that we feel. He asked for relief just like we do. His body manifested the same stress symptoms we experience. But he didn't stop at the feeling. He moved to submission. Not my will, but yours. And then he drank the cup we deserved. He experienced the wrath we earned. He was forsaken so we never would be. Jesus took our sin, including all the times we've responded to anxiety with sinful unbelief, with autonomy, with refusal to trust. He paid for that. And so now when anxiety hits, we don't have to add the weight of condemnation. We can bring it to the Father the way Jesus did, honest, desperate, human, and submitted. Now when anxiety attacks, and it still does regularly, I don't immediately spiral into self-condemnation. I don't treat the feeling itself as evidence I'm failing God. Instead, I pray Gethsemane prayers. Father, I'm terrified about this situation. I want relief. I'm asking you to change this. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours. The anxiety doesn't always disappear, but the shame does, and that changes everything. Does this change your approach to battling anxiety? What's been your experience? How do you distinguish between human weakness and sinful unbelief? Drop a comment. I read everyone, and I genuinely want to hear what you're wrestling with. Next week, we wrap up this anxiety series with the most counterintuitive discovery yet. The only path to true peace is admitting you don't have it. If you thought today was challenging, next week might break your brain.